Hello, and we are live on this Saturday evening. For me, at least, it's Saturday evening. Hello again. My name is Mark Turi. Welcome to my channel. If you're watching this on the replay and/or live, please, like always, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm at 83 subscribers. My watch hours are getting a lot bigger, and my views as well. So I'm very happy about that. But I'd like to, of course, grow larger. So please share this video, give it a thumbs up, like it, subscribe, etc. And this past couple weeks, I've been able to get into sort of a swing of things, I think, to some extent, where I am getting a schedule. And I'm thinking now, as I mentioned in our last stream, which again, thank you everyone who came out and watched that about languages and my experience with languages, which was on for me Wednesday evening. I'm thinking of doing a Wednesday evening stream in which I talk about some issue that's maybe a bit more, I guess, with the word heavy. I guess I don't know, or whatever topic. And in addition to that, I will be doing these streams as a Q&A stream along with something maybe a little bit lighter, maybe more on entertainment or something. Last week, of course, I talked about science fiction, and this week I'm going to talk about books. I've got, I believe, 8 books, if I'm not mistaken. We can figure out what that is afterwards. But I've got 8 books that I am going to talk about today after we do maybe a small Q&A session. If anyone has any questions for me to answer, please leave them in the chat and I will address them as here. If not, if for any reason we don't get too many um, questions or anything, I'll just give you some general questions that people ask me, but I will also talk about those books that have helped me along the way. First person I see here is Peter. How you doing, Pete? Hope everything's good with you. Thank you so much for being here, and really appreciate you supporting my channel and coming on. You've been a great support and a great help. So thank you very, very much. And again, what I normally do within the first maybe 10 minutes is just um, do a little small talk before we get into our topic. And I was just going over previously in the couple minutes before when you joined on, Peter, was just to talk about the liking, subscribing, and that my Wednesday streams are definitely going to be different subjects. For example, I'm going to get back into doing PowerPoint presentations, and I've got a few of them lined up that I can do in the next couple of weeks, which is really good. I want to say in total, I've got maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6, if I can sort of stretch a few of them. So that should be enough for the next couple weeks. Also, yesterday I uploaded the very first episode that I did with the Notorious Never Ends, and that led us to do this Nerdy Punch episode. And there's 9 videos, so they'll be coming out interspersed between the next maybe let's say 2-3 weeks, and then after that I'm gonna maybe do more like original content, probably try to do more editing and so forth. But you pretty much know what you get from me, at least when I'm doing these lives. And then hopefully I could do more regular lives. It would be nice. I don't know about every day, but maybe I could still do more. Now, I'm not sure what it's like for everyone here, but continuing with the weather report where I live, it's been brutal. Still extremely hot. I would like it to be less hot, but what can you do? And so I went out yesterday to do some errands, and I was sweating. I went out today to do some errands. I was sweating. I've got something to do tomorrow. I plan on sweating, and I just wanted to cool down. I don't know about you. But I just see my buddy here, Clearwater Chad. Hello, Clearwater Chad. How are you? We still have to get a stream together of Grip and Pete whenever, of course, you are ready. I know, again, you have an exciting transition, and I hope that for you in the next couple weeks. We'll have to do some study streams and things like that in the future. That's right. Clearwater Chad is here. A wet chat contest will bring a crowd. It will bring a crowd. I don't know what kind of crowd. We can only speculate on that. Good to see you too, Chad. And if you want to do a wet chat competition, you want to just jump in a pool or something with a bikini on, that's up to you. I don't know if I'll be watching, but you never know. Definitely Griffin Pete again. I know again you're busy. That's okay. I saw some of your videos. Chad going to a couple protests, or was a protest? Excuse me. It was the strike at UBuff. So understandably, understandably you've been busy, but we'll schedule that sometime soon to get more insanity between our two characters. And yeah, I'm ready for the sweltering summer to just be over. Um, you know, I don't know about all y'all, but I am, and I was hoping by this week there would be something would give in the weather, and it keeps telling me that in the next couple days it'll be cooler, and then it doesn't get cooler, and then the next couple days will be cooler, and then it doesn't get cooler. So right now, again, today was 33 degrees Celsius. That's in the 90s. I'm not sure. Someone can do the you know the calculations on what that is in Fahrenheit, but I think it's in the 90s, if not high 80s. And it was supposed to be last week. They reported Weather here reported it was only going to be around 25, which is I think somewhere around 70, which is like perfect for me. Says I think Pete was referring to the strike. Oh, okay, that's what it was. My mind went somewhere else. Don't take notice of that, Chad. Um, I hope you got out of the rain. Um, yeah, it would be nice actually if it rained here to cool everything off, but that's not what the rain does here. The rain makes it hotter where I am, and if it cools it off for like half an hour, and then it's back to the same temperature it was before, if not hotter. Yeah, Chad, I know, no worries. Well, just my mind goes weird places. Don't worry about it. It's all in good fun, anyways. But for charity, maybe we'll for charity, maybe we'll do a wet chat competition or a Chad and Pete competition if I ever make it out to Buffalo. We can order some calzones and panzerottis and jump in a pool. So 33 Celsius is 92, but you have humidity. You actually don't have that much humidity where I live. It's not as humid. It is hot though. So, but it's not. It's weird. I don't know how to exactly describe it. So, I've been to Arizona, I've been to Las Vegas, I've been to the desert in like the Southwest United States. Um, that's hot, like that's heat. And then I've also been to the South in Florida, which I mentioned previously, and that's humid. And I also grew up in Toronto, where Toronto's humid, Buffalo's humid. And where I live, it's like kind of in between. It's probably more hot than humid, but it's not like a desert hot, but it's just still not good. Well, 98 degrees, yeah. Ooh, it's a dry heat down from 103. Oh my stars. That is insane. Yes, and you're in good, Chad. I hoped you would be. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, it's sweltering, so I want to get that temperature down. But I don't know if Chad's around. Chad Pete, I've got an alcoholic beverage with me tonight. A nice bottle of Czech beer. And although it's not deep dish, I do have some pizza. Forgive me as I chew, but not bad, actually. Little salty, A little salty, but good crust. Let's just see here. 100 to 3 is nothing compared to the steering of 110 degrees Fahrenheit summer in the 90s. Yeah, 90s are nothing. Ugh, I hear you. All right, it's 10 after, so that's my mark. My name is Mark, of course. Um, no coincidence there. And yeah, I wanted to start a Q&A, but let me just go because we don't have any too many official questions, which is okay. No, not a problem. And for the next 3 minutes, I'll get into um, some questions that I frequently get asked. And maybe every week we're not going to have a peer Q&A, but maybe I'll just go into presentations. But I still think I'm gonna give everyone like two common questions that I'm often asked by people um, over the past, gosh, almost 20 years, that I've left Scientology in 2008. So 16 years ago, I guess, right? If my math is correct, 16 years ago. So in this case, I was looking at some of Joe's questions. I thought that was really interesting. But a lot of people really like to really know like why somebody joins pardon me, an organization like Scientology. And of course, that's kind of the most basic question. And it's a little bit hard to address necessarily because it has a lot to do with like almost everything in life. A lot of it has to do with personal experiences that one has. And it takes place over a very long period of time. And in my case, I was introduced to Scientology, and about a week or week and a half later, I officially joined. And I was on vacation in May of 2005, and then about 10 days to 2 weeks later, I officially joined in Toronto. Want to give a shout out here to Shell. How are you, Shell? Don't worry about being late; it's all good. I'm just getting into a brief. Uh, Usually, what happens is if nobody has questions, it's not a problem. Um, if you do, again, drop them in the comments. But if not, because I've answered a lot of them. Um, but I was just answering the question, which is a general question of sort of why I got into Scientology. Then when I'm done with that, I'll go into the presentation part, which is what I usually do. Try to do half an hour of introduction and then some questions, and then go into the presentation for the last half. But right now, I was just sort of addressing that. So, and I'm glad you're doing well. I hope you've been doing good down there in hot, hot, hot Florida, I'm sure. Must be really humid down there. So we were talking about the weather before, it being hot here. I'm sure it's pretty brutal there. At least I hope. Hope it's getting better. But yeah, the first question is sort of like, yeah, why do people get involved? So in my case, I got involved because I was looking for something and to do. I just graduated college, community college, and I didn't have a lot of job prospects. And I was applying for a lot of work, and I wasn't getting any, and I was, feeling very disillusioned. And so Scientology sort of presented itself as a way that I could get to Los Angeles. And I've talked about this before, so I don't obviously want to, go through all of it again. If you want more details, you can check out my video I did with Aaron. But essentially, for me, it was a mix of feeling pretty lonely, feeling pretty bad and depressed, kind of hopeless, to be completely honest. And Scientology just sort of sold me this idea, sort of sold me this goal, and it gave me a lot of motivation. And the indoctrination and getting to there, and then all the cognitive dissonance that I had were things that sort of came later, you know, um, realizing a couple years later, 3 years later, I wasn't any closer to my goal than I was the day before I joined Scientology or discovered Scientology, and eventually, of course, I left. Um, but, at the same time, uh, those initial encounters, if you wanna say that, were the people gave me a lot to hope for. And on the surface, that's not a horrible thing. Hope, it's not a horrible thing. Of course, it's one of those things that can be taken advantage of for sure, and that's what happened with me. So I would say anyone who's interested in that sort of question on why do you get into Scientology, there's a myriad of reasons. That's very complicated. Some of it does have to do with being tricked or lied to, but that's also kind of a simplistic way to look at it. There is a concept called deceptive recruitment or deceptive recruiting, and organizations like Scientology and destructive groups, that's what they do. They promise you the world. You may also not necessarily be aware that you're being recruited for, like Scientology. In my case, it was Dianetics and so on. So it's an interesting question. If anyone out there who's watching this on replay, or Peter or Shell, Chad, if you're here, and you know someone who is in an organization like Scientology, maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's always a good one to ask them, like, why did you join? And for me, I would have told you about all the things I was promised. And then it's a good question because then they can think about their life currently, and probably all the goals that they came into the group with went away very quickly, and they're just devoting themselves to the group. And it's a good way to plant some seeds of doubt. And that's also another thing, like that question alone of just, hey, why'd you join? And then they tell you, and then you say, hey, why are you doing that now? you know? So those are some little things I think that are really good. Let me move to Pete here. What does joining encompass? I thought that just purchasing a Dianetics book qualified you as a Scientologist for just a head count 6. It's a very good question. A very, very good question. This is not something that is very well defined, and you make reference to this, which is good. It's a bit complicated. Obviously, if you join other organizations, whether it's um, a fraternal group or another religion or something, right? Like a club, you might have like a card, or you might have a membership, or you might have to pay a fee or something, right? But with Scientology, it really hard to who defines a Scientologist is up to the person, pretty much. So you can think of yourself as a Scientologist like I did the first time I walked in the door, and I was like, I'm a Scientologist. And then when I first bought, actually not just my first materials, which was a Dianetics DVD and so forth, and some booklets, introductory booklets. But really, when I signed up for my first course in Toronto, roughly 2 weeks or a week and a half, 2 weeks after I discovered Scientology in May 2005, and in late May of 2005, 20 something or other, I can't remember now, I signed up for my first course. So really from that point on, I thought of myself as a Scientologist. I used the term Scientologist. Of course, that freaked out a lot of people, my parents, my friends, my sister. But I did, and almost right away you learn, um, especially when you're doing courses, you learn, and I forget the policy, so you have to forgive me, but there is a policy that Hubbard says, which is if you really don't identify as a Scientologist, even if the repercussion is that you lose a job or you lose a friend or you lose, someone like that, you're basically, if you don't admit it, then you are in a lower condition. And that's you're in a lower ethics condition, and that takes a little bit more to explain. But it's a really serious thing. Like if somebody says, "Are you a Scientologist?" or you don't admit that you're a Scientologist, it's basically like a high crime misdemeanor type thing. And so, just one moment. Pete, because we got a special guest in here. Joe, how are you? Just going through a question that Pete asked, which is an amazing question. I'm just about explaining a little bit of it, and his question, of course, is here. What does joining encompass? So, yeah, so basically, it's a high crime. So put it like this: pretty much, if you're doing like a service or something, like a major service or whatever, you're in Scientology. If you join staff, you're in Scientology. But for the organization, yeah, anybody who buys a Dianetics book is counted as a Scientologist. So years and years and years ago, one of the people who are, gosh, one of the president of the Church of Scientology International, who was Heber Jentzsch, who hasn't been seen in, I don't know, 2 decades in public or something, and is probably in a home somewhere. Um, he said that there was like 10 million Scientologists or something in the world, or sometimes you get 15 or 20 million. And those really are just numbers of people in this, what they call the CF files or the central files, CF or central files, which is someone who's bought a book from a Scientology organization, did a course of service in the organization, or is a longtime member. Like I'm still in the Toronto Central Files. I'm still in the Berlin Central Files. I'm still probably in the San Francisco Central Files. So like I'm three organizations, right? My name is still there. My old name, by the way, I changed my last name 8 years ago, 7 years ago. Doesn't matter. Um, they know who I am anyway. But I'm still there. Like I'd still be in the Toronto Central Files. I have a file with me. They'd have all the receipts for the courses that I took. Same with San Francisco and so forth. So I'm still there. So I'm still counted. Um, but yeah, if you buy a book at a book stand, they get your name and address. That goes to Central File. So that's really what they mean by Scientologist. It's a way to skirt around official membership records because in certain churches a member is not just someone who would come once a week just to discover, you know what I mean? You'd have to go through an initiation process. So, like anyone could go to a Catholic church, you don't have to be Catholic. Anyone could go to a Protestant church and be whatever. You can go to an Islamic masjid. You can go attend, Hindu services or Buddhist services or whatever. Most churches and stuff are literally just welcome for everybody. But then there's this initiation. You got to convert. In Judaism, the course can take 1 to 2 years. It's something official. You've got rites and ceremonies. Buddhism is very similar and so forth. So, if you want to do those things, you have to put in an initiation. There's no initiation like that in Scientology. It's just like it's up to the person, like really. And that's why it's um, very difficult to count numbers. And that's why one of the biggest indicators for numbers is two things that a number of ex-Scientologists have said, and also people like Tony Ortega, who's never been a Scientologist, but he will rightfully say one of two things, which is the number of e-meters that have been sold to Scientologists is a good indicator of mid to high level Scientologists because it means that you're going through auditor training or you're on your OT levels. And then number two is certain organizations have a magazine like Flag, AOLA, and so forth. So some of these big organizations will have a magazine. I think it's like monthly, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it's bi-monthly, but it's usually called Source Magazine or something like this. And they list all the graduates at the back of the magazine. So what is their subscription numbers are like? Of course, there's duplicates there, but at least that has some pretty good examination of people who are at least dedicated enough to get a magazine and an e-meter. And this is usually why we get the $20,000. Are we going to say there is a $20,000 e-meter? That's how I got mistaken. But this is usually where the number 20,000 members comes. And maybe it's less, maybe it's more, but that's a pretty conservative estimate. So, Joe, I'm going to get back to that in a moment. And you did say here you don't have to interrupt. I have to interrupt. Come on. You are what I would call a founding member. When I start asking people for money, we're going to have a Joe DiCeppo level of a founding member. We're going to have a big statue so people, when they donate millions of dollars to me in the future, and they'll be your founding level. You'll be revered in our community. Of course, that's not going to happen because that might be culty, but I can dream. Um, so you can't be ashamed to be a Scientologist without being in a lower ethics condition. Yeah, pretty much. If your employer asks you, are you a Scientologist? Like, especially in places like Germany, where Scientologists are not allowed to work for the government, and banks like Deutsche Bank, the national bank, or Deutsche Bank, doesn't do business with Scientology persons and organizations. Like, you know, you either lie or you tell them you're a Scientologist, and then even if you get fired, you're vindicated because now you're a martyr. And this is that martyr complex that happens. So that's one of it. I forget. Someone can ask Aaron or someone else about that. If you go to another ex-Scientologist channel, any of your favorites who are ex-Scientologists, born and raised in Scientology, you can bring up that because again, my memory is going back 16 to 19 years, so mine's fuzzy, and I wasn't born and raised in Scientology. So someone who was maybe raised in Scientology, Aaron or someone, you can say like, is what condition is that? Because I remember that there is a lower condition. I can't remember if it's liability and maybe liability, but something around there. Treason is another one where like you're just not admitting that you're a Scientologist. And it's this big hoopla and all this nonsense. Um, and then it just ruins your life, which means then Scientology has more of a chokehold on you. Um, because then they come back and they say, "See, we told you we were right," and now that your life is on the fritz, now you can get a job with a Scientologist, and your existence becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. Hence the echo chamber. Um, of course, I said we will, and we'll have a member status for you. Yes, I go with I bought a Philips, one of my favorite companies, Dutch company, as a razor. I love it, and I just buzz it every few months because this is. I'm at the age where I've had so many haircuts. I don't think I don't know. I just don't want to pay any more for haircuts. About $100 razor. It's been good. Shell is here, of course. Thank you. Founding member. Did I start a cult? I started one on your behalf. And a smile, of course. My first 5 to 10 founding members will have special place in my heart. And we got Chad as another founding member, Pete's a founding member, Shell's a founding member. I think Marilyn will be a founding member, and we will exploit that until we will exploit that forever, literally. And Joe's cult. Well, Joe was unfortunately in a cult, and she's got some videos on Marilyn's channel that you can go see with an organization that I've only briefly heard of before. I never had any experience with them, so it was really interesting when I saw Joe's videos and experience, and then I started doing some research, and I was like, wow, really, really awful stuff. So um, you can go to Maryland's and see. So thank you, Joe, for sharing that. Also, a big reason why you are a founding member. Um, we do trauma well in this community. We stand and support people who've been through intensely awful situations with Scientology or other groups or relationships, people, etc. And we're all just trying to make a step forward. So I like to say, if I were going to make a cult, the slogan would be, the slogan I would make is, "It's time for a 180, not a 360." Personally, that would be our chant. We would chant 180, 180, 180, 180. And we would do that very fast for hours at a time. Gold star member, whatever you want to be. Gold, you can be gold if you want. I reserve the right to be platinum, but that's just me. So you know how it is. And yeah, this stuff has been doing good. I've been in general. I just want to say I've been very, very fortunate to do these lives and to have people here. And I really do hope. Hopefully soon we'll go on Aaron's channel to get a more of a boost. But I'm still really happy doing what I'm doing. I mentioned earlier, just at the start of the stream, that I'm gonna probably do 2 days a week for now lives, and I'm gonna start doing um, mm, some PowerPoints in the next couple weeks because I have a whole bunch of topics I wanna do PowerPoints for, and I've got at least 5, maybe 6 that I can do, and there'll be history topics and things like this, so I might reserve those for my Wednesdays, and then like this, we'll do some questions and answers, and then maybe do more personal stuff or things like this. I'm not really sure. I might do like the academic Wednesday and the Scientology Sunday. I might call it that or something. I don't know another word for academic. What do I call it? Wicked Wednesdays, wacky Wednesdays. That's not what we're doing. It's more serious. Is there a nice British word, Joe, with a W that's a synonym with serious, hardline stuff? Because it's not wicked, it's not wacky, and I can't think of one. But we'll do Scientology Sundays, which also sounds like a horrible dessert, by the way. A Scientology Sunday would be empty and it would cost $1 million. But that's none of my business. I'm a Gold Press Platinum Star member. That's true. Now, bars, strips, or what was the other one? Bars, strips, and I forget the other one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You will. Tourism, tourism. Slips. That's the other one. Thank you. Slips, strips, and bars. Good to see Joe here. Yes, the rules of acquisition. 285, I believe. All right, so it's about 9:30, and of course, maybe in a few years we'll get to some cult member levels, but until that point's coming, I still got some stuff to do here. My gold meritorious. Again, the goal is to go Excalibur, which is to donate 25 million US dollars. Tourism. Yeah, I know it's tourism or tourism or tourism. Tourism, I guess would be mine. Tourism, I guess. Would that be two eyes though? Because like technically it's the ism of tour, and tour, it doesn't really mean anything in Hungarian, but it is a lake. So technically, would we go to that lake and worship the lake or the river? Excuse me. It's actually a tributary river. How about we do this? My improv skills. My Pete lives with me. 24/7. So if I'm thinking like Pete, we go to the tour tributary river, and that's like where we set up a church and we set up our headquarters. And it's Romania. What are they going to do? You know what I mean? Like we just pay them to turn the other way. And then you want to start a cult in a beautiful, nature, gorgeous tributary river in the northwest of Romania, next to the Carpathian Mountains. Come on, you know, that'll be our compound. We'll start everything from there. So tourism. And of course, that's also a good front group because we could have a tourist office. You see? Do you see? It's all coming back. It's all coming to me now. So it's like, yes, we would love to show you to the Carpathian Mountains. Are you religious? Have you ever heard of tour? Yeah. See, the brain is always going with fraud and how to exploit other people. Because again, Pete, although a fictional character, still lives in my psyche. Chad is a diamond level. Let's be clear, he's a blood diamond level member. Okay. Um, but I appreciate everything. Also, if you're tuning in a little early, I have some Czech beer in one hand, a bottle. I find bottles for some reason taste better. And I have pizza, vegetarian pizza in the other, which, as I said, was very salty but had good crust. And we do have actually very good pizza in my city. So forgive me as I chew, but I'm going to go all the way back up to Joe. My start comment here. What are some books that have had a big impact on my life? I will take one sip here. I'll get into that in one moment. Nice Panzerotti. They don't make them here, unfortunately. Yeah, it's from Chicago. That's all I'll do. Um, you got a hair of a pea out of me there. So the first thing I want to do here is now it's 35 after, is to go to the second topic today. Again, if you do have any more questions or answers or any other comments as I go along or from before, please leave them in the chat, like and subscribe and so forth. As I've been saying along, I do want to grow my channel. But the reason we're here, as well as to look at this. I need to do that. There we go. Okay, I'm sort of new on this stuff on how to put slides, but I think this is the best one. Yes, this is the best one for me to do. So just give me a thumbs up. Can everybody see my presentation? You should be able to see it. Book recommendations, some suggestions that have helped me along the way. And in this, my first live PowerPoint, and as I mentioned, I am going to do more live PowerPoints in the next upcoming weeks because I have a bunch of topics, and I will. Oh, good, we can see it. Okay, thank you so much. The giraffe cult, yes, they make me a little uncomfortable though, because I mean, they're just horses, right? I mean, they're fancy horses with long necks. I get it, evolution and stuff, but come on, they're horses. Like a zebra, it's a horse. Come on, and good. Okay. So I'm going to share just a couple of the topics before we go, and if I don't, I'll send something on the community tab just in case I forget. But I wanted to reserve this week for book recommendations, things that have helped me through the last 19 years of or the last 16 years of leaving Scientology for various reasons. Now, some of these books, I think in most of cases of these books, I did read, within the past couple decades. But in one case, I want to say, at least in one case, I read a number of years ago, then reread and stuff. So I'll get to that. But the first book, and everything here is in alphabetical order per title, is cliched. You know it is. And of course, it's Orwell's 1984. Why I say it's cliche is because, for the times we're living in, authoritarianism, autocracy, totalitarianism, and then also not just in politics, but in religious fields, cult fields. It's just an excellent, excellent book. I first read this book because it was required reading in high school in the 11th grade. So for our American friends, that would be my junior year. So I guess I was probably 16, 17, somewhere in there. This was 99, 2000, excuse me. And I read it. It was one of the first like big adult novels that I had read that was over whatever pages. And I also really liked the movie that they made with John Hurt. It's actually a great film as well. And both the movie and the book I watched within whatever semester that was in high school. And again, if you've read it, I'm sure many of you have probably at school or otherwise. Does it much need to be more? Not much more needs to be said, but it is about surveillance and Big Brother and Newspeak and all these little things that make up this just wonderful story. It's not a very happy story. It's not a very happy ending. But you know, where I come from in Canada, we're very used to Hollywood endings, and sometimes to not have a Hollywood ending, not have a happy ending, is sometimes true to life in a very sad way. But I do think Orwell and his writings are brilliant. I also really love Animal Farm. They also made a couple movies with Animal Farm. One which starred the voice of Patrick Stewart back again maybe 20 years ago. So these are just good thoughts and good meditations on politics, society, language, and so forth. And it just really inspired me when I was a teenager. One of the tragedies of this book, though, when it comes to Scientology, is this is a book that Scientologists read a lot. And when you read it in Scientology, which I did, and then you read it out when you're out of Scientology, which I did, it becomes really weird because it's like, oh, I'm reading it in Scientology because this is how Scientologists think society is. And then the thing clicks and you're like, no, but this is what Scientology is. And so it's weird. It's a little disconcerting, but it's also very strange. But Hubbard did recommend books, and this was one of them, along with hard sell books and Alice in Wonderland and stuff like this. So it's a little odd, but I definitely think when you leave an organization or something that's similar, high control, destructive, and so forth, 1984 is just a good way to decompress. And I always like to make the analogy of a waiting room or a sweat lodge. When you leave a high demand group or a destructive group, you're kind of in the waiting room trying different things. You're sweating out all of your experiences. And, this is a good one to just be like, okay, well, you know, here's how bad it can be. Here's some thoughts and some ideas, and you can make some sort of parallel comparisons. So that one is my sort of my number one as far as title is concerned. The next book that I really, really, really enjoy is Beyond Religion by the Dalai Lama. And this is an interesting book. I think I only read it for the first time a few years ago. I want to say within the last 5 years, because I think the book is maybe 5 or 10 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know. I was looking through books, and normally, like, I have other books by the Dalai Lama. He's written a lot of books, and this one caught my eye. So Beyond Religion, and at the time, um, pardon me, I was looking at. I was like in these humanist groups, and I don't know, it wasn't gelling. I didn't really like it, and I read this book, and I was like, huh. The thesis of this book is really that there should be some kind of ethics, a kind of a secular ethics that everyone can get behind regardless of their religion. And that's really what it is. It's like, let's think beyond the religions that kind of divide our beliefs and sort of divide our cultures. And let's try to get something that doesn't do that and bring people together essentially. And it's like, if such a thing could exist, what does it look like? And to me, this was like, I was like, oh well, this is better to me than secular humanism or even religious humanism. It's not a thing, unfortunately, but it just, for me personally, and again, I don't want to denigrate or bring down anybody. This is just my opinion. But it was like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty much, he's like a form of humanism, at least in my opinion it is, but one that made more sense than the other varieties of humanism that I had seen and experienced. And so I thought, yeah, it was really interesting. And so, like, I've read it a couple of times, and essentially that's really the thesis of it. And it's also what I do like about the book, specifically also with the Dalai Lama, is like, okay, Buddhism can be very complex. It can be very complicated. It can be very esoteric. But the Dalai Lama is very good at using um, very good palatable language. He's not looking down on anybody. It's not like an academic kind of thing. Um, you know what I mean? And I really enjoyed it because when it needs to be simple, it's simple. When it's about philosophy, so it is complicated, but it's also, the language in it is really nice. It's not elitist, and it's not too simple. So I just really enjoyed it. Now Joe here came up here. Funny thing, I was reading a book by the Dalai Lama, not that one. When I got into Diamond Way, they told me I shouldn't read his books as they'd only confuse me. Yeah, again, should have, right? I mean, I guess you're right. It would only confuse you. Believe me, in Scientology, we can't read Buddhist books. We can't meditate. We can't do any of that stuff. And there's a lot of stuff we can't read either, and you just go along with it. Hello, N. Everyone watching from the beginning. Hey, thank you so much for watching the beginning. Thank you for being here. I don't know if you're subscribed. Please remind me if you are, but also like, subscribe, and leave comments if you would like, questions and so forth. I'm just getting into my presentation, but you can always ask a question whenever. And I'm very, very glad you're here. It's very nice to see you. Thank you. So it was just a really, anyway, just a really interesting book. I just really liked it. It's not terribly long, so it's good. And it was I found very direct, and I liked the fact that it wasn't elitist, even though it is about ethics. And of course, ethics and ethical philosophy can be extremely pretentious, heady stuff, but done with the charm and the character of the Dalai Lama. And I'm also sure he's had people who go straight for him too, obviously, translators and so forth, but it just was a very good book. The next one, I read this, well, I watched the movie first, shortly after I left Scientology. And then I read the book not too long ago, of course, Alexandre Dumas's The Count of Monte Cristo. And I enjoy the story of this because it's kind of a futile story. It's a revenge story that has a lot of futility. And I don't really want to spoil anything, but it is a revenge story. And it's also about someone trying to get justice and gratification out of revenge. And it doesn't really turn into what the character thought. And I loved it when I first read it. I kind of like these endings that are kind of like you blow up a balloon and then you just let the air out and it just kind of goes everywhere. That's kinda how I sort of like it, and I also realized after reading this book that there's a lot of, like, sci-fi, fantasy, and other kind of novels that have done, this, kind of thing, where someone's seeking revenge for many years, and then it becomes kinda futile. Um, Reminds me of The Princess Bride when Hugo Montoya finally meets, Christopher Guest's character and says, "I'm Hugo Montoya, and killed my father, prepare to die," and then Christopher Guest just turns the other way and runs. Um, so I would say I also like The Three Musketeers. I grew up with The Three Musketeers. So when I saw Alexandre Dumas, I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I read The Three Musketeers as a kid." They had that Three Musketeers movie with Charlie Sheen in the 90s, with, I think Ken Branagh was in that one. I think Kiefer Sutherland was in that one. So I remember watching that movie and liking that movie. The Bryan Adams song, I think "Everything I Do It For You," which was also because he was Canadian, and that was on the radio, like, every day for 2 years or something. I think that came from that movie, or Robin Hood, doesn't really matter. But I can't remember now. Tim Curry, maybe? Was it Tim Curry was the bishop? Anywho, it's, Alexandre Dumas, Three Musketeers. Again, I liked it. So I'm reading this book, I'm watching the movie, which has Guy Pearce, which is great, and I just love that. I was like, "Wow, this is really influential on a lot of the storytelling that I like," which is kind of defeatist and kind of a little bit depressing and a little bit disconcerting and whatever, but I just enjoyed it. I also related it to my own situation because, I think it was, a couple streams ago, I mentioned the feeling of betrayal, after I left Scientology, feeling betrayed and feeling angry at a whole, groups and groups of people. And this kind of reminded me, it's kind of futile because the people that you're seeking revenge on or you're betrayed on, they're doing their own thing. You might not even be a thought in their mind. And so that kind of put me in my place and helped me kind of take some steps forward. And then I read it. I want to say I listened to it. I'm a big fan of Audible, so I really like Audible for audiobooks, and I'm a big audiobook listener. So I think maybe last year, I think sometime last year, I found this. I think it's free actually on Audible. I think it's like an automatic download, and listened to it, and it was again brought back a lot of those memories of like, yeah, move on, it's futile. So there we go. Count of Monte Cristo. Being yeah, being a historian and being someone, who I've done a lot of research in the interwar period. That's one of the periods that I really like. It's kind of my bread and butter is, 1918 to 1939, or should I say 1919 to 1939. Those 20 years are very, very interesting in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, all over the continent, because a lot of things were happening, including the coming of the Third Reich. And this is by Richard Evans, who is a British scholar. I forget where he teaches, but I want to say either Oxford or Cambridge, because those are the best guesses. But he's a very, very good historian, and he documents the times of Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich, and what was going on in Germany at the time. It's a big book. It's a thick book, but it helped me also in writing writing my honors thesis, which I did when I in Canada. This was back like 2019. I wrote an honors thesis, 15 pages about the German Revolution and the German Civil War, which happened between 1918 and 1919 in Berlin and Bavaria. And I am going to give a presentation, a two-part presentation on that in the next upcoming weeks. So if you want to know things about Rosa Luxemburg, um, and the Bavarian Soviet Republic, which lasted for 3 weeks, we'll go into that. So this does put a lot of that together. And one interesting thing, I can't remember if I learned it from this book or if I learned it in general, but Berlin before 1934, before Hitler took over, especially in the 20s, was a very progressive city. There was a lot of LGBTQ entertainment. There were bars where men dressed like women, women dressed like men. Of course, we used to use the word cross-dressing. Now we might just say gender queer or gender nonconforming or something, or even transgender. But there was also some citywide acceptance, at least in certain parts of gay and lesbian homosexuality, male and female homosexuality, and that was all, of course, brutally ended. And the LGBTQ community was one of the many communities that was brutally repressed under Hitler's regime. But Berlin itself has a very extensive queer history and queer clubs and queer bars and stuff going back from the 1920s to the 1930s. And so it's just interesting, and an interesting lesson to see how quickly things can change for marginalized communities. So Joe, I'm going to start this. Once I've done my presentation, I will answer that, which is that one, and then I'll start this one, and you did another one that I'm going to star. Yeah, this is a good one. I'm going to star that one. I will star this one, Pete, and so on. Okay. I have a few star ones. I just put them up there just to remind myself to go to them. So that is that one. Next one here is my favorite, personally, my favorite philosopher is Karl Popper. And if you don't know who Karl Popper is, don't worry about it. Some people do, some people don't. It's not like you have to know. I'm not a evangelist. I'm not a Popperian evangelist. But I do like a lot of his works. And one of his most influential books is The Open Society and Its Enemies. And it's a critique of, like, things that happened during the war. Karl Popper was, I believe he was born in Austria. I think he was Jewish, if I'm not mistaken, but I think he lived most of his life in Great Britain. And he wrote a lot about democracy and the death of democracy. He wrote a lot about history. He also has a really great influential book on the history of philosophy called The Poverty of Historicism. And historicism is like pseudo history. He was very critical of the Karl Marxist view of history, which is sometimes called dialectal materialism. And I might actually do a presentation on some of that, what that means, what that is. I definitely want to do a presentation on different schools of thought in history. So I might get into that. But I really, really like this book. It's big. It's in two parts. It's a little bit more heady, so it's not something you can read on the beach unless you're there for a week or more. it's not really a vacation read, which again is okay. I read, 1984 on vacations and The Count of Monte Cristo on vacation, so, each to their own, of course, but it's really, quite a heady book, but I really enjoy it, and Karl Popper is actually one of the first persons or people in history, to put together the term pseudoscience. He has a very interesting, um, what might call it, phrase or saying, which is that science disconfirms and pseudoscience confirms. So the point of science, and this is not always 100%, which is that science is used to disconfirm claims. It's not only to disconfirm claims, but that's one of the many parts of the scientific methods. And then pseudoscience is essentially confirmation bias. So if we look at someone like L. Ron Hubbard, I mentioned also before with what how did Hubbard do his research? I was talking with Marilyn, and Hubbard would have certain things come to his mind when he was auditing himself, and because it's a pseudoscience, Scientology is a pseudoscience in a huge amount of respect. He would just look for the things, and then he wasn't interested in disconfirming his discoveries. He was only interested in confirming it. So this is why Scientology is called a pseudoscience, because again, some of the things that people like him and so forth are just they make a hypothesis and then they look for the information that confirms the claims. They don't falsify. So anyway, I really enjoy Karl Popper, like his work, and this is one of my favorites. The next one is a little bit of an offbeat kind of a thing. Back in 1998, Hollywood put out the movie The Thin Red Line, directed by Terrence Malick. Stars a cast of tons of actors, including John Travolta, who's in a scene in a cameo, but Nick Nolte, Adrian Brody, Jim Caviezel, Sean Penn, Woody Harrelson. And why I put this on the list is actually because, well, I did watch the movie as a teenager and have subsequently watched it many times. I love it. It's a beautiful film. I really love this movie. But when I was living in San Francisco, when I was on staff, about a week before I was kicked off of staff, I walked from my apartment to what is called the Fillmore Shopping District in San Francisco, and I went to like a used bookstore, a very small local used bookstore, because I actually had weekends, Saturdays and Sundays off in San Francisco, which I did not have in Berlin, and I guess it was on a Saturday or a Sunday. And I walked to the bookstore, I see The Thin Red Line, and I bought it for like $4, and it was the pardon me. This cover is one of the original covers because the book, I believe, came out in the early 60s. So it was re-released after the movie was released in the late 90s, so 98, 99. And this was the first book that I read, um, started it just as I was leaving Scientology and finished it as I left Scientology. And one of the things that I liked about this, why it's so personal, is because in Scientology, when we read and when we study, we're supposed to use study tech. Now that's a whole thing that deserves another video in and of itself. But L. Ron Hubbard created some of these methods, one of which is called the misunderstood word. So I remember reading through this book, and numerous amounts of times in this book, the word bivouac is mentioned dozens of times. Soldiers are bivouacking. I didn't know what a bivouac was. It was a misunderstood word. And yet I was reading the pages of this book. I could still remember what the book was about. I could still remember the characters. And if anything, I found out after I read the book that a bivouac is simply a camp, right? Bivouac, I think it's a French word, but it's simply a camp that soldiers make. That's it. So I'm reading this book. I think it's 3, 4, 500 pages, word for word. I'd seen the movie, so some scenes that are in the movie are in the book, some aren't. They're using the word bivouac, and I'm like, I think this study tech is just BS. I think it's nonsense. Like, Hubbard tells me I'm not going to remember what I'm reading if I go under a misunderstood word, and yet when I finish the last page, and I didn't know what bivouac was, I remembered the entire book. You know, I remembered it. So it was like one of these things where I was defiant against L. Ron Hubbard's tech, and it was just very personal to me because not only do I love the movie, not only did I love the book, not only did I remember the book, not only was it again a very large book. I want to say three, four, 500 pages. It's a long book, um, but I read everything and I understood it, and I didn't need study tech, which I had always hated anyway. And so it sort of proved to me that I could read books, and then I started reading more and more after that. And if I had misunderstood words, I would just look them up afterwards. And I found myself being, you know, a more voracious reader and better studier without study tech. I think this is the last one. Yeah, this is the last one. This is one that I recommend for people, regardless of your stance on religion, where you are in religion, where you are in your journey. You love religion, you hate religion, you're leaving a religion, you're joining a religion, doesn't matter. And this is a book called The Sociology of Religion by one of the founding fathers of modern sociology. His name was Max Weber, or in German, it's pronounced Weber. And why I recommend this book, this is something that I read in 2018 when I was taking a sociology class, an intro to sociology class at during my undergrad that summer. Um, and when you do an intro class, an intro to sociology class, you go through you go through like 12 or 15 different aspects of sociology. So you start off with like, what is sociology? You learn about the history of sociology. So Max Weber's there. And then you go through like education, you go through immigration, politics, religion is a big one, and so forth, because they're all aspects of our society. And I was in the library looking for another book by another author, and here it is. Here I pick up Sociology of Religion, Max Weber. I put two and two together. Okay, I'm learning sociology. We had done that sort of introduction to the sociology of religion in a class, like in a lecture. Um, that seemed interesting. And then Max Weber. Okay, I was learning about Max Weber. I had kind of heard his name before because he wrote a book called Protestantism, the Protestant Work Ethic and Capitalism and the Protestant Work Ethic. Please, someone can check that out for me, which is very interesting. So I'd known about him for a couple of years, but I read the book, and what it does is to sort of sum up. And I also touch on this when in a slide that I did when I talked to the Nerdy Bunch about the intro or the overview on religious studies, which is that there's different sociological approaches to religion. And one of them is called the functional approach. How, regardless of our individual stances on religion, again, whether we think it's positive, negative, or benign, whether we think about it a lot or not, um, or whatever, is that religion does play a function at a social and societal level. And they create communities. It helps give, you know, organizations meaning to people's lives and so forth. And so that there actually is some net positives, some functional net positives in religion. And again, that's from a collective macro sociological perspective. Your own personal perspective on that, which can be negative, it can be destructive, and so forth, is something different. But I read through it and I was like, yeah, this is really like sort of answered the question of like, can humanity ever just get rid of religion? And this is a really good perspective to say, like, probably not, because there would be certain functions in our society that wouldn't be there anymore. And then I had to, of course, think back to the fact that, I had grandparents that were communists, came from communist countries, spent some time in Yugoslavia, although they did have religion when I was a kid, Cuba as a kid, reading about Marx and religion and the opiate of the people. And we were also learning about Marx in the sociology class. And I've read Karl Marx, and this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, like, they had kind of a religion, they wouldn't call it that, but their lack of religion was a religion, and how like even these groups, these humanist and atheist groups, want to kind of become churches. They want to mirror religion in a number of ways for similar reasons, and it just really became comforting. So again, when I talk about 180s rather than 360s, my purpose or my agenda is just to feed a bit of information that might help people, because I see a lot of people, including myself, because I'm always trying to be accountable. So in myself, I have done a lot of 360s after leaving, echo chambers and cults. I got into echo chamber and culty kind of thinking, maybe not religious, but it was political or whatever. And so at least for me, it was okay. Like I had to kind of step back a little bit and be like, okay, if religion does have a function in our society for groups of people, I can still have my own personal perspective, but it still has a function, whatever its functions, etc. So I really highly recommend it. I'll just go over this because there are a couple start questions and I'll get to them in a moment. But 1984, very specifically, I know it's cliche, but dystopian, surveillance. It has a lot of good allegories to cultic thinking. Beyond Religion, which to me is a very interesting meditation on humanism and ethics that has a very good message and is written very well. Count of Monte Cristo, man, the futility of revenge, coming of the Third Reich, why did the Germans, what were the things that were in place to make the Germans go towards someone like Hitler? It's very fascinating. The Open Society and Its Enemies, again, critiques of totalitarianism. It's a book about democracy and so forth, which is very good. An open society, better than a closed one. Thin Red Line, again, more of a personal one because of me letting go of Scientology and study tech. And then The Sociology of Religion, just to learn about the functional approach to religion in our society. So after this, there's a couple of questions here. Question for after the presentation. Have you seen The Truman Show? What do you think of it? I love The Truman Show. I've seen it a bunch of times. I believe it came out in 98, so I was 15. I saw it in theaters with my friends. Didn't really get it exactly, but still liked it. And then watched it on TV subsequently. And I want to say during the one moment, during the pandemic, I was watching tons of movies and TV shows, and I did rewatch The Truman Show. Ed Harris is brilliant, but Jim Carrey is so good. And yeah, that Tori Christman has always said that her experience of being in Scientology, leaving Scientology is a lot like the Truman Show. And man, do I love that ending. I absolutely love that ending. And in fact, when I sometimes say goodbye on my lives, he'll say, I notice I say, have a good evening, have a good afternoon, whatever. It's not exactly Truman of good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, but it's close enough. So I love that movie. Um, for after the presentation, would you ever write a book about your life experience or anything else? I have. Nobody seems interested. So who knows? Maybe if this channel does well, I will write a book or something of all the experiences I've gone through, or do lives like this, where I get to at least talk about my experiences. So it's at least it's out there. Because books, I wrote a book about my experience in Scientology. I shopped it around. Nobody cared. They weren't interested. My family in Florida actually knew literary agents and publishers in Miami. 10 plus years ago, I went down there. Nobody really cared. So then it was to self-publish. Don't have the money to do it. Can't do it. Was going to do it in an ebook. Maybe put it on Amazon. But I think this is a better way to do it. And who knows? Maybe if all goes well in a few years and YouTube doesn't shut this down, I can write something like that, because yeah, a lot of people would be interested into knowing all these different experiences I've had. And right now, okay, I have 83 subscribers. I'm happy as a clam that I have 83 subscribers, that there's 83 people who actually like hearing to talk to me is 80 more than I thought originally. So definitely that is something I would love to do in the future if I can. And I also, being in history, I will probably love to write more history books and history things. And the presentations that I'm doing, PowerPoints, are things that I have written for essays. So I'm still sort of writing now, but it's a lot more history. As far as personal experience, then that's definitely a goal of mine. I'd like to know your thoughts about Who Moved the Cheese by Spencer Johnson. Was referred to me when I wasn't handling stress well and was manifesting physical reactions. I will put it on the list, my friend. Never heard of it, but I will put it on the list. I appreciate that. Then what do you think of The Body Keeps the Score? I'm sorry, I don't know that one. Basil van der Kurk. I don't know that book, Joe. So for those two books, I'm going to make note of them. I'm going to make note of them. Who Moved the Cheese and The Body Keeps the Score. And I will look into them, and I appreciate that. There's a website I've used to self-publish my sheet music books. Okay, throw it into our PM, and yeah, throw it into our PM, because yeah, even just doing like an ebook or something actually might be nice. Because I also have, like, again, history stuff that I want to sort of publish as well, like books, and not just essays, because I'm writing a lot of essays. I got to write my thesis again, and then my goal is also to go into a PhD program. And when you write your thesis, you're basically writing a book. So it's going to be, a few hundred pages book. So if I do have a book in the future, it will be my PhD dissertation, which would, for me, which will be fantastic. And then being able to at least look at that process and how that works, to get published and things like this. Because right now, I did send some of my essays before COVID off to a couple of universities to get published, and then COVID happened, and then I haven't submitted them because now they're 5 years old. So now they're considered a little older. So anyway, and you'll see a lot of the stuff that I've been doing within the past 2 years in the future. So everybody, thank you so much for this. I hope that helped. I don't know, again, what books you guys have read, haven't read. Leave some suggestions in the comments as we've done. I will look at Who Moved the Cheese. I will look at The Body Keeps the Score. I do say that, like, this time I did refrain from, books specifically that were politically partisan or had to do with sort of an economic policy, and also specifically religion. Psychology is also very good. I haven't read a lot of psychology books, so it looks like the ones that Peter and Joe recommended are in that. So that's something that, again, I don't normally go for. So that's good. Also, business and stuff I don't normally read. So if there's anything there, my bread and butter is always like linguistics and history and some fiction and a lot of sci-fi and sort of moral stories and whatnot is the ones I normally grab, but I like to think outside the box as well. So you can pass along suggestions and stuff like that from me. But yeah, please let me know again in the comments and so forth. What I might actually do is on the community tab. So please, if you're on here, we've got 5 people watching now. Keep your eye on the community tab. I might start doing polls. I might give you guys, like, for next Wednesday, I'm thinking I'm going to make it in a poll which topic you would like. I have 2 topics I'm kind of going back and forth on. Which should I do first? I'm going to put that up on a poll so my viewers can vote on which one you want me to do first. And here are some topics just to close out that I've been sort of muddling around with, um, talking about, and I'll put some of these again on the polls. So one thing I would love to do is 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 not always necessarily a PowerPoint, but something more like this, where I'm just sort of talking now, is on the concepts of biological versus social determinism. That's a really interesting question. So, what are we? It's a nature nurture debate. What are we more influenced by? Our genetics or our biology, or are we born as blank slates and society determines? One of the philosophies I like, and I'm a little hesitant to do it because then I don't want it to be an evangelist type moment. Um, but is epistemological pluralism, I might do like, hey, what is that? What does it mean? But I'm trying to refrain from things that like I actually believe in, and but maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do like epistemological pluralism versus something else, and we can bounce back and forth between two ideas on how to know things. I do get this a lot. A lot of people say to me that they like the way I break down ideas and I balance different perspectives and how and why I do that. Like, because to me, I just do it, right? Like, I'm not really thinking about it. So, like, when somebody says a word, I sort of take the word and I like to figure it out and stuff. So, I might do like almost like an instructional video on how I kind of think through things. I used to be in the media. That's actually my original training. So I thought we could do one on the differences between news, opinions, and pressure groups. So, like, what is a news source? What is a news source supposed to do? What is opinion and commentary? Why is that different from news? And then what are pressure groups and what are they? And then again, the different schools of thought and history. So, like, what is social history? What's Marxist history? What is Popper history? What's liberal? What's empirical? What's political history? So, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And what I'm going to do again is probably later today, because it's only a few more hours for me, or tomorrow, I'll put up a poll, but in case you don't see the poll or we don't get too many things on the poll, I'll just make something in the next couple days. So probably by Sunday, Monday, certainly by Sunday or Monday, I will have the next schedule for our Wednesday live and then also for the following Saturday. So again, once again, I'm just going to close up here and just say thank you, everyone who is watching this live, watching this on repeat. Please like, please subscribe if you haven't already. Please help support my channel to help it grow. I'm really really happy with what has been, you know with these lives. I've really been happy with the people who are watching. We've gotten a lot of, again, good core support from a lot of people, and a lot of you are my friends that we've known, we've talked to. It's really 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 exciting, and I'm very happy that you're here. And I really just want to do more, and I do plan on doing more. So you have any thoughts, you have any suggestions, if you have anything that you want to know, questions and answers and things like this, always let me know, either in the comments of these videos, or I think there's a messaging on YouTube now. I'm not sure, but if you can get a hold of me somehow, just say it. And yeah, I'm just very, very happy that we have a good core group of founding members who will be exalted in the next life by me and only me. And again, as I paraphrase Truman from the Truman Show, for me, it's a good night and good evening. It may be a good afternoon or even a good morning for wherever you are. But again, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Please look out for the topics for our next live. And again, tomorrow and the next upcoming weeks, I am going to be re-uploading episodes of the Nerdy Bunch. I uploaded the first one yesterday. The first one we did with Joe, actually. Joe and the Notorious Never Ends, from about a year or so ago. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting my channel. And again, good night. Thank you. And I hope you have a great evening, great afternoon, great night, great everything. Thank you.